This is a short vid made because one of my subscribers basically asked me a question, and here it goes. This comes from the DC Blackbird. Hey Mr.Red, you mind making a retort vid for my question here? While both Final Fantasy VI and VII had an overall serious storyline, an overlapping theme of sadness and despair, more so in VI, Final Fantasy V, however, decided to take a much more lighthearted approach, similar to Final Fantasy IX to VIII and VII and VIII, until the end, with the whole cliche of fate and villain exdeath. While 5 doesn't have the impact of 6 or 9, I still find it very enjoyable. My question is, what is missing from 5, or what could it use to be a titan of 4, 6, and 7 standards? Courtesy of the DC Blackbird. Okay, well, it depends on what you mean. Final Fantasy V wasn't released here in America. I have no idea why. It's a pretty good game. While its story isn't as epic as, say, Final Fantasy VI, or isn't as cinematic as Final Fantasy VI, or as soul-crushingly depressing as Final Fantasy VII, it is very, I mean, Final Fantasy V is like your standard Final Fantasy story. You know, 4 elemental crystals, blah, 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 save the world from darkness, blah, blah, blah. Standard Final Fantasy story. We've seen the 4 elemental crystals used in like 4 or 5 Final Fantasies. Plus, Final Fantasy games that aren't Final Fantasy, like Bravely Default and the Heroes of Light. Here's the thing about that. Final Fantasy V doesn't have the tone, but it adds its own niche to the Final Fantasy franchise. For example, Final Fantasy V is the first time that the job classes were finalized, where they were really, you know, legitimized. These are the classes that have stayed with Final Fantasy for years, throughout the entire thing. The Blue Mage, the Red Mage, the White Mage, the Black Mage, the Samurai, the Ninja, the Thief, the Ranger. I mean, all of these classes, certain things may change about them, but they were established in Final Fantasy V. The only thing that kind of brings down Final Fantasy V and makes it not as kind of like the redheaded stepchild of between 4 and 6 is that it has a very different storyline than what most people were used to from Final Fantasy. It wasn't the over the top cliched epic that was Final Fantasy IV, and it wasn't the cinematic overture that was Final Fantasy VI. But in its own way, Final Fantasy V was epic in its own way. It was just as big and is just as important as Final Fantasy VI. The difference is that Final Fantasy V didn't come out in America, so people don't appreciate it like they appreciate 4 or 6. So I hope it's not that it isn't epic or titanic, or, you know, doesn't have its own strengths. It's that it never came out in America, so people don't appreciate it like they do 4, 6, 7. You know. It's kind of like, it's in the same vein that Dragon Quest is actually, in my opinion, a better RPG franchise than Final Fantasy. But because a lot of them never came out in America, or, you know, weren't really localized very well, people don't have the same, you know, it didn't come out in as many markets as Final Fantasy, so people don't have the same connection to it. But if you go to Japan, the mother of JRPGs, Dragon Quest is beloved, in some ways even loved more than Final Fantasy. So it's all conjecture. And that should answer your question.